Hi everyone, this is Niyati, and it's my honor to have Leon on our next edition of Fireside Chat with CFOs today. Um, Leon is super great at growing finance teams, operations, bringing in people, scaling, doing all of those things, and he's going to bring in um, that experience in essentially helping us understand what a dream AI agent looks like when looked from his lens. Welcome, Leon. Anything you want to start off with?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm excited to kind of get in the conversation. I know the landscape is changing rapidly within tools that are available, automations and AI implementations and various solutions. So excited to get into the conversation.
Yeah, same here. Uh, all right, let's maybe just get started with the basics. So, what are your daily tasks as a CFO? What do you do every day?
So every day, I mean, I think this is the same, right? There's different grades of CFO and different grades of businesses. I support with a variety of clients that really that changes day to day. But my approach is generally to be structured as much as I can, and every day, early in the morning, usually just email catch up, which is very common. Review team status, kind of more of a little bit of morning I do for triage and some project management of my teams that are deployed across clients. And then beyond that, it really depends on what I have laid out in the day. It could be if client work, then it's really reviewing reports or outputs that have come my way and providing recommendations back, building decks, or just having communications, meetings, and such with whoever I need to, whether it's vendors, banking, or clients base. So day to day tasks really change. It's pretty variable, which I like in the work.
Got it. And are there kind of metrics that you review every day or reports that you regularly review? So I do understand a lot of reports come your way, but is there something that is like something that you all always on a watch out for? Like you
Yeah,
need to make
and,
sure.
and I think that varies, right? You set priorities because some of my clients are engaging in large capital expenditure projects that have different metrics, and I do my best to implement data-driven approaches to everybody, build dashboards or have data streams and data flows that allow for aggregation of real-time data. So as much as I can, there's real-time data available. I use it. So some of those have implemented cash flow monitoring systems. It could be budgetary review, ongoing budget reviews for potentially CapEx projects or others. But it's prioritized based on the business I'm working with, its industry, and its life cycle, and more so the life cycle, right? Obviously, businesses that are growing and considering capex or investment deployment, or potentially seeking investment or exit strategies, they're going to have a different maybe review margins day to day and pricing as far as like new work that comes in. Others might have cash flow circumstances that there's constrictions and that needs more tight cash flow monitoring. So it's really dependent on where priorities are for day-to-day review of things that I look at every day. There's always weekly, quarterly, monthly cadences, depending on what's available and more so how much time is available to build out and identify those metrics and KPIs where the timing could be that it's just too labor intensive to get real-time inputs.
So the biggest pain point there, I guess, is that it's intensive in putting everything together. Or is there kind of a recurrent pain that you see in trying to being on top of these reports and ensuring they are there and things like that?
The pain points are ones that we're going to see throughout, right? It's if it's labor intensive, there's probably a technology restriction that creates it as such, right? The concern about AI is really the data availability, data normalization, integrations, and really the orchestration. So to be able to get that real time one, you need to it's the full stream of the data flow when it comes in to what systems it needs to be aggregated through to finally populate to kind of an end database to be able to provide you those metrics and real-time inputs if you can. So if unavailable and you're stuck in whatever industry you're in, and you have to play in variable systems, sometimes you're at the beholden to a larger vendor, a larger client to not be able to normalize that data, and it has to come in either manually or through CSV or various uploads. So, the challenge becomes there depending on volume, timing, and origin of really that data source and the data flow. So, if it's timing, it's just obviously some things, it's still a challenge to unify
Hmm.
business data across systems.
Got it. And how much of it do you end up doing on your own? Or at what size of a client do you kind of actually end up crunching all the data in, trying to unify it, trying to find anomalies, all of that, or it's typically outsourced, I mean, or delegated.
Well, it's delegate. I mean, generally, that what I'm doing is essentially building the teams that are able to take on the workflows that are needed, but at the same time, trying to identify areas of automation, data normalization or ETL processes, whether that's integration middleware layers, Zapier, connections and things like that. But oftentimes there's a tech stack issue that I run into with clients, and try to identify and optimize that tech stack because systems are not integrated well. They build processes that aren't mapped from parameters or data points across systems to easily kind of extract and transform that data to unify it. So, some of it is internal to build out better systems, process tech stacks, and data infrastructure. And some of it is really, like I said, you're beholden to external sources. And sometimes that data is just behind a wall of a
Hmm.
system that, you have to work in due to maybe key suppliers, key clients, et cetera. In those cases, it might be a little bit of a hybrid. What are the best ways to really extract, transform, load that data into a unified database? And sometimes that this does have to be manual, but day in, day out, we're finding more and more opportunities to automate that either through agents or integrations or API connections, um, to do that with less manual input. I think
Hmm.
that's still going to take some time, but I think we're seeing like big improvements there. And then the challenge is going to be making the right selections, because you still have a lot of choices as far as how you can approach those problems on a case by case basis.
Got it. And in this setup, who is the, I would say, final decision maker? So in the sense that, let's say, all the everything that you could do, if that's enabled, then who is the audience? So who takes the decision?
I mean, making the decisions as far as system selection,
Uh,
or making
Validity of the outcomes. So let's say systems are selected, they have been built.
the
What
the
about it?
outcomes really become cross functional, because the outcome for process improvement downstream at the production level of people doing the accountants doing month close or FP&A gathering
Mm,
insights, right? When they get out of the ETL process or out of data extraction and loading, they can do more strategic, insightful work,
mm,
and the timing becomes faster. So you find an efficiency and a productivity enhancement at that team.
mm,
And then the ability to deliver real-time inputs to a leadership team, be it CFO, COO, it could be marketing, could be et cetera. But if you're able to provide key dashboards to decision makers and provide them insights, KPIs, metrics, OKR, outputs, to the key decision makers,
mm,
that it should be a cross-functional solution. Because if you identify those and then you identify, hey, there's a delay, a lag, maybe there's a lack of insight or inputs from the overall architecture of the data, that we're not even seeing certain unit economics that may be available to us. So
mm,
it's identifying those, optimizing the workflow, which would ideally the production level accountants and the FP&A people
mm,
would expedite their outputs and provide them a better quality. For the end, say leadership team, where the outputs kind of final delivery of dashboards and insights, they're able to work with more data, more accurate data, more timely data by nature is more accurate, and timing and the ability to make decisions, strategic inputs, pivots is greatly enhanced, because you're not waiting for a closed cycle. Potentially, the closed cycle can be a little bit more of pretty automated if you can solve a lot of those problems.
Hmm.
because there's often, one or two key areas that might delay a particular close cycle in uh, whatever business you're looking at, and it's often data related.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So the reason I was asking you that is how often do you get involved in, let's say, business model discussions with, say, a CEO, or create something for the board, or those kind of things based on the insights that you and your teams gain.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. That's providing board level and business model inputs, right? The business model, and what I try to identify with CEOs and boards, and
mm,
sometimes these businesses are smaller, is the belief that you're working off of an assumption.
mm,
Every business model has some variables and parameters and levers to provide potential different what if and scenario analysis. And
yeah.
before you even have that model and the data to validate what it is that your assumptions are. So, the business model, right? It's identifying what are the key assumptions. Like, you believe that your margins are X, you believe that your price points are here, and this will result in some kind of financial output. If you tie that to a quantitative analysis, it becomes, you can't argue it potentially. Whereas, especially in the smaller and growing businesses that don't have this level of input and insight, they're working off of maybe history, from legacy information, from this is how we've always done it. And, given the current socioeconomic and various economic
Mm,
cycles, those assumptions have changed greatly between, whether it's inflation rates, whether it's tariffs in the industry that are impacting you, et cetera. So you need an ability to test those assumptions on that business model and build out a model for forecasting. So a lot of that I kind of drill, and I meet with the leadership team or the stakeholders, and go and drill a little bit deeper to identify what are key quantitative assumptions that you're making about your business model
mm,
that really input, whether it's, is it your acquisition cost? Do you have that insight? Do you have your price points, your margins? If you're making investment or a growth strategy, right? For me, it's always tethered to some level of data analysis, and
mm,
that's not always done. And I think it's more so you expose when you have the ability to report back on it
mm,
and deliver that insight in a way that, triggers a little bit of that creative function of that leadership to say, oh, okay, we've been looking at it, and I can show it to you through the lens that you've been seeing it. But here's the reality of the situation for a comparison, and allow you to determine, hey, are your assumptions valid, or have we just broken them, and we have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and revisit the nature and structure of the organization and the decisions we've made.
got it. And how much of this is automated, like in the sense that we're talking about simulations and forecasting models and all of that? How
There
much
are
of,
some, there are
yeah.
some fantastic tools to build modeling. Again, Excel still exists. It's still the champion of doing some of these things. It's come a long way in and of itself,
Hmm,
as a financial analyst tool. But there's a lot of things at our disposal, and it really just depends on the data structure of the clients I work with. Depends how many systems we have to extract from. Is it smaller? Is it pretty integrated? Can we use some pre-built tools that exist for business intelligence? Or do we have an ETL? Do we have to use, some advanced functions of Excel like Power Query, or implement Power BI? But it really depends, right? That becomes a little bit of a technology discovery of where's the data, how accessible is the data, what is the structure of the data, um, and how do we unify it and report on it, and what do we need, what do we not need, right? So
hmm,
it's really kind of dependent.
got it. And where does sales and marketing come into play? Obviously, they'll come into play in terms of numbers, but do you end up interacting with them, influencing them on the GTM strategies, or it's more like communicating stuff like this is your target, this is the budget? Do you
you know
get involved in that?
no, I think it's really important, because to me, and I've worked with marketers for a long time, we have too many good tools at this point, and marketing has become incredibly data driven,
Hmm,
as has sales, right? There's a lot of success metrics and
hmm,
criteria that you can put downstream, lower in the sales funnel to identify, hey, are the strategies you're utilizing successful? Are you running A/B tests? What is the impact on cost of customer acquisition? What are conversion rates as applied to varying strategies?
Mm,
So, marketing is an investment, and marketing has an assumption there of a rate of return on particular strategies. And there's varying strategies to use today. We have so much access to varying mediums for outreach,
mm,
uh, for investment, for still, boots on the ground trade shows and conferences.
mm,
And, those are all dollars at play that you're making assumptions that are you spending them and deploying them to the right areas. I don't like taking an aggregated approach to these things, because I think there's always areas of optimization lower. So it's like, hey, this is the budget. This was the result. If you have a generally good return rate in the aggregate, just revisit it and rubber stamp it for the following year, I think is a lazier approach than drilling in. That data should be available, right? The marketing tools and systems that exist right now, and GTM is
mm,
probably the area in business back office operations that I think has seen the largest advancement in automation and AI. I think there's so much going on in that space. The challenge is just making good choices because it's a very saturated area of new technology, AI agents, lead lists. It's ever changing. So that's one of those areas that I think no, that's a particular area that I think is very key, that is often lost on some CFOs because it's a little bit outside of the wheelhouse of
mm.
traditional finance. But I absolutely like to dig a little bit deeper, and that data and that analysis should be available if set up with the intention to do so upfront.
Got it. So there are two things that I kind of want to go deep into, but before that, maybe a few more generic questions. I do want to talk about emails and Excel because both are things that you mentioned, and I'm curious as to what is the potential of AI and maybe very CFO specific insights that we can bring in for both of those tools. But before that, what documents do you actually look at every day, and like kind of where do you store them? What kind of documents do you look at every day? Where do you store them?
It depends on the client. There, sometimes it's still traditional cloud repositories like Google Drive. We use an application called Keeper that does a lot of
Mm,
document retention, and particular for accounting and kind of the accounting side to the close, which does great document retention and systemization of
mm,
accounting, reporting, and month close protocols. Um, but I mean, the only thing I guaranteed look at every day is my email and my calendar. Beyond that, it really depends on, I set kind of weekly targets, and I do some particular reviews with different clients. I definitely look at like some cash positions. Often it depends if that is still a little segregated with teams. That might be Excel, and might be a bit of a report that gets sent back to me with some key balance sheet items week over week that I want to look at, working capital changes, variance analysis, and trends. Um, it could be AR aging reports or cash if there's a cash constricted company. If there's another that is actively working, I could be looking at a budget to actual. And it really is dependent on the needs of each client. I set the expectation of reporting that I require back from my
mm,
teams, and where available, I set up good dashboards. So there's tools like some clients have brought in Float as a cash flow monitoring system, which has some AI integrations. I'm be looking at dashboards in there.
mm,
Some of them I might be looking into just lower level reporting with some of the employees that I put into place at these companies. So, every day, there's often, and it's what's available to me, right? If we're going through a close cycle, I'll be
mm,
going through kind of Keeper, and I'll be looking at, oftentimes I'm also looking at every day, really where my team is deployed and what they're working on. Because for me, it's very structured approach to everything, right? I have timelines and milestones set across each client and all of my team that generally I'm looking to make sure that's getting done. And then, they can flag certain anomalies for me, but when a particular month close is done, Then I'll be looking into really that reporting output at a deep dive level where I spend the most of my time post month. And then in the interim, it's kind of check-ins along the way with my team that is doing active monitoring. If we see, something flags and it warrants outreach, then I'm kind of that escalation point back to my client's leadership CEO to identify, hey, you've got a trigger kind of here that you're running into, a potential constriction, or we have to make some changes, etc. Within, strategies that are working and not working, or vice versa. It could be going the other way. If we're, working on a marketing strategy, if there's a particular campaign running, or there's a project, whether that's CapEx, a marketing project, or, a large client that we're undertaking, those are kind of the things where I set priorities and I set triggers and flags to say, hey, these are the areas that require faster response time than
Mm.
just waiting for, aggregation of data. So it's a mixed bag depending on what season of the month I'm in, and which clients are in whatever strategies or goals that they're setting. So I generally know where to look. Beyond that, it's really just team alignment, making sure
Mm.
everybody's in the right place and things are progressing.
Got it. And what AI tools do you use right now? And kind of for what tasks?
Oh, I use a variety of ChatGPT being my core for a lot of things. We use Teams version, which kind of closes off the open data. I still do it from some data analysis. It's
Mm.
getting far better. Copilot can be okay as well. I use for report building and sometimes just client status reports. We use a tool called Gamma
Mm.
that does good outputs of clean kind of PowerPoints and presentations. QuickBooks has some AI implemented as well. We have business modeling systems like Fathom that has some AI integration in it as well. Obviously, Hyperbots with clients that require that large volume invoice intaking. So I use tools as I see them, where the benefit AI is becoming to me. Who I've worked in technology as well previously for a long time, but it's becoming ubiquitous and it's becoming kind of standard in every tool and system.
Mm.
They're building some level of LLM or machine learning in the back end of most modern technology systems. So to say, yes, there are some key tools that I turn to for assistance in particular areas, but finding more and more that it is just becoming an active portion of kind of the ingrained tooling to most software.
Got it. And but that's like a large variety of tools that you already use. So that's nice. In spite of that, in the last few weeks, have you come across a situation or a task where you are like, I need AI to do this rather than me doing it or my team doing it? Like
Yeah,
some scenario where you are like, this is something that has to be automated.
a
Kind of.
1000%. I mean, if you want to take like if there's a large amount of document, like say which has happened often, and it's gotten really good and it's gotten better with the agent function. But if there's say like some PDF documents that you need to extract, say there's like a variety of bills, and you just need to extract um, level, inline level unit itemization, aggregate them in a spreadsheet, do some kind of analysis, instead of that manual data entry, that's done, right? You can feed that through most modern AIs and pull that together. So it's like and this is the place where it's like the fact that you have to do it this way. I think this is going to be what we're going to see change sooner and
Mm.
sooner and sooner, is that there's still a lot of like bits data aggregation. If I'm getting data from disparate sources,
Mm.
whether and maybe it's not all Excel based, right? To transform that data into something that is structured that can be analyzed, that's a good use case for AI, and I've used it in that way. Um, and I think that's a good function. That it's really data aggregation. It's gotten better at, and again, you still have to check accuracy, right? I still don't trust it all the time. It can still hallucinate. It's gotten highly accurate, but those are some of the things where I know, hey, this is safe enough. It's not, there's not sensitive information. It's not, if I had a voluminous level of data that I couldn't
Mm,
test accuracy in, I wouldn't do it. It's not to the point because there's too much in what we do that
mm,
requires 100% accuracy, right? I can't, 99.9 is not good enough in a lot of what we do. This is
mm,
accounting, it's tight reconciliation. And depending on the use case, if that demand is a little looser or the data volume is such that I can do some level of secondary check, I still have to do a secondary check. And that's going to be the challenge, especially if like, hey, that's a good solution for mass data aggregation. And I do believe that it will probably do a very good job. But the challenge, if there's not an easy way to manually do an aggregate accuracy check, then
mm.
I would be remiss to try to solve it with like a common, some of the standard LLMs or models that are existent today, if that
Got
answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. I'll maybe structure that question a little differently too. And let's say you woke up in the morning and as a finance leader, so let's say CFO woke up in the morning and you had an AI powered workspace that you could look at, and it had all the features that you liked or that you needed, or a client needed. Like I want to hear both sides of those answers. What are those features? What are those functionalities that you would like to have right there?
you know, it, I think a lot of people would say you just want another version of yourself. To create that would
Difficult way.
require access across all of the sources of data, right? And that becomes a data privacy and concern. But it's really, a sounding board that has all of the source access
Hmm,
as myself, right? Something that can be combing through my variety of projects or communicating with my team to aggregate information, whereas I still require to do check-ins, right? Still have to check in with the team, still have to check in on maybe this application, that application, this email, that email.
hmm,
The thing is like what can go and comb, and we're getting closer and closer to it. And I have a couple solutions in place um, at very specific use case areas. But and we're kind of talking about the AGI question a little bit here.
hmm,
Who can kind of go and do when I'm sleeping, come back and wake up in the morning and say, where are we at? Where did the day end? I'm generally spinning a lot of plates, communicating with clients, doing
hmm,
sales, managing my team, doing some level of escalation support. So, you know, even if I truncated that into various agent buckets, right? It's really having kind of like, hey, my own personal leadership team, like that
hmm,
an agent that's very aware of what's going on here, on sales and marketing, on operations, on process improvement, and even continuing education and
hmm,
scouting. Because the other side of it is, like I said, the landscape is changing. The
hmm,
tools are rapidly evolving. New solutions come to market every single day. So at the same
hmm,
time, I also want to be paying attention and keep my ear to the ground to am I making the top recommendations to my clients from a technology stack standpoint
hmm,
and what's available, what's new, what's changing. And that's, it's moving so quickly that, you know, have that kind of feeder coming through the other side. But um, yeah, it's really like kind of morning dashboards and somebody that would know what I'd be looking for and just kind of bounce those things off that has awareness of and contextual awareness across kind of all of the areas of focus that I have to spend my time in day to day.
hmm. Got it. And okay, let's go back to email.
Sure.
Um, so there is Copilot. There is obviously there is Copilot in email if there is Outlook, right? What do you think a CFO would like to see if this workspace, intelligent workspace, or that intelligent agent also sat inside the email? What is the like? What do you think which will be like the coolest thing, both from a CFO perspective as well as your perspective?
It's one of those things, and I just get almost a little bit more philosophical with it. At what point do we take the human element out of everything? Um, but there's still a level like to the point where we don't communicate with anybody. So to some extent, I like to keep my email a little bit human. It's where I kind of don't want to always put, agents in. There's some level of automations and rule setting that you can always do.
Mm,
But, there's always, the easier side of like, you have a VA for some things, but you know whether to kick if something is, hey, this needs to go to scheduling and it gets passed to my VA, or it's a quick question, a quick answer. Um, even, what would be cool is like, hey, it understands intent, priority, or impact. So I don't have to go and check, right? That certain things pop up, notify as high priority. The agent can respond almost on your behalf, right? I think there's different ways to approach it to keep the human element in, so that it's not always just AI triaging communications
mm,
with other people. I think it just becomes a slippery slope. But I think there are areas where we can improve it, but I think it would flag really intent signals and prioritization, which really needs to know my prioritization, right? How do you
mm,
know what's important to me
mm.
and how I would generally like to respond, and maybe reach out for input? Hey, I think this is high priority. What would you like to do or respond? And then, there's still a touch there that might increase speed of response, because what is email? Whereas like the biggest complaint is people that are, slow to respond or keeping up with it, because myself, as with some people, just have insane inboxes that blow up every 15 minutes. And it just becomes like kind of the management of that to allow for a more rapid response. But I would still always prefer that response to still feel like me. Otherwise, I feel pretty disconnected from my audience.
Okay, so basically, you would like to have help in organizing the mailbox, but you would still like to own the responses. Yeah.
Yes, kind
Um,
of, right? There's so many ways to organize. It's more so like an agent that kind of understands flags and can kind of act as you, but asks for directions first, knows
mm,
when and how and what to ask about. So I'm just, me myself, just being creative. What's a good way to approach this challenge without losing the human element? Because I think there's a lot of areas of automation that already exists in mailboxes and tools and systems that do a good job. Email clients that create a lot of optimization, but there's always areas for improvement.
got it. Then comes Excel. How do we make Excel even more intelligent? So Excel has existed. It has existed through generations. It has existed as probably one of the core medium of sharing accounting and finance data, and doing working there. What, according to you, will make the life easy of anyone trying to analyze accounting data? So obviously there are simulations, macros, templates, variance analysis, forecasts, all of that. But what do you think will uh, is the dream out there when it comes to Excel
It's
like
the transformation of data structures. Power Query has become an incredibly powerful tool within Excel to normalize, transform, load data, but it's still like it still has a learning curve. It's very, very powerful, but it still has a learning curve. Now, I think when you see the output of Excel formats, and QuickBooks is particularly one of the more annoying ones that kind of formats the financial reports and does not always provide well structured and clean data types. Now, it has direct integrations into Power Query and Excel and all those other things, but it's, I think, the ability to intuitively transform data that is coming from a variety of formats where there's not always the exact match of lookups or mappings. I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit where agents can start resolving that issue. The biggest challenge to financial analysis is often the data structures, and we're finding more and more strong tools, even in Excel, that transform and load into structures and ways that we can automate outputs of reports. But they still require input. They still need to be checked. If something changes in a format somewhat in some period for a reason we don't know, there can be a failure of an automation downstream. So those are kind of some of the things where I think, and I think we're going to start seeing it more and more, where the AI agent is going to intuitively um, look through varying formats, but identify some of those like but not exact, identify structures, and retransforming data in such a way that they can aggregate and orchestrate data
Mm.
across different formats, different output systems, etc., rather than still requiring some of that hands-on. Now, even the hands-on level that we have today, there's really not much need for VBA anymore, or some of these macros with some of these advancements within Excel. But even still, it still becomes like that is one of the more advanced areas of Excel that people still don't gather or understand, but it's very key to providing strong analysis in that
Mm.
data aggregation. So it to sum it up, I think if you can put a Power Query in AI
Mm.
mode and have an AI that understands data transformation
Mm.
better, I think that would be a home run, and I'm sure people are working on it.
Got it. Uh, Actually, before I close, last question. What two questions, in fact, not the last one. So two questions. The first one is, where do you see risk when we start putting in fairly intelligent, let's say finance specific um, agents for CFOs, or let's say intelligent workspace for CFOs? What is the risk that you see, especially with respect to adoption?
The risks are many. I think tantamount risk is going to be security always.
Hmm.
And the challenge of having, like, there's still too many distributed systems, too many data sources, and then you have AI agents that have some level of self reasoning that aren't truly, there's some that are still not truly probabilistic and still somewhat deterministic, algorithmic based. But if they're reasoning, right, they're open themselves up. There's been a lot of opportunities for people to manipulate
Hmm.
LLMs. And then if you allow some kind of reasoning model with some LLM layer, and then it's able to access across data sources.
Hmm.
We're in finance. We're working with a lot of sensitive information, um, in a lot of key areas. So once there's a middle layer that is, working with transforming, loading, whether across, internet, it just becomes security risk if you're allowing credentialing to them, if they need to solve with encryption, with credential protection, with data security and protection. We're asking a self reasoning kind of robot to get all of this access, but we don't. But the reason we love LLMs and AIs is because they're coming to conclusions that we may not have predicted. Now, you're allowing a system like that to have that much access and that much security clearance, and there's a level of unpredictability to it by nature, by design. That's a massive risk. The secondary risk is always going to be accuracy, right? You're asking for it to do things, and accuracy in what we do is number one, right? You can't have a variance because it hallucinated on a particular data point or area or business line, or didn't pull some data um, somewhere else. You know, then that's a risk. Um, and then, less of a risk, I think, is always going to be timing, and the data which is pulling, that it's making sure that it's getting kind of apples to apples data, financial information that is timely applied within to the right, if there's relationships that need to exist, and you're trying to identify and make conclusions and insights between, say, marketing to sales relationships or something else, and if that data is not readily available and you're comparing data that is to data that isn't, and you're trying to move as quickly as possible, um, but there's still kind of a miss there, you don't want to interpret data wrong. It's not necessarily inaccurate, it's just incomplete data at that point, which leads to inaccuracy and leads to making decisions with not the correct insights. So I think those are some of the key areas that I think we're working in, especially now with modern AI. It's going to just be data security and accuracy for sure.
Got it. And maybe the last one. What according to you is the dream AI agent for a CFO or a finance leader?
um I think, like I said, I think when in the area I work in smaller and mid-market
Mm.
business, you see a lot of manpower issue. That's literally what I work with. What I do is provide manpower within reasonable budgets, but again, there's still some level of oversight. So for me, it becomes, area where it can, one, reduce any burden on myself to do kind of some of the more manual tasks that I still required, whether that's insight review, um, and checking, structuring, and optimizing my team. I use a lot of different tools, right? And it's like, can they come together to kind of be, a partner that I can communicate back with? And that just becomes, again, that agent to kind of rule them all, that I can, work within my project management hub, within my CRM hub, and, act as if I do, right? So it's just saves me the step of working in the system myself rather than, say, working through a prompt or text or verbal based inputs back and forth to somebody that has the level of access that I do within all of the work that I do, whether that's clients or oversight and everything, and take actions on my behalf. Now, that's kind of where we're getting to, but I think the level of access and the risk in accuracy, the risk in security is we're not there yet, right? So it's still, I still have to pop into the areas of focus that I need to do within every day, whether that's financial review, oversight of the operations of my team, sales and marketing, all of those key areas in my operation have some level of workflow automation built into it, probably a layer of AI enablement. But it's becoming like those are the areas where we have to come together and pool up to maybe like a master agent to kind of communicate down. And I know some of these things are getting better and better, but I'm still I don't think we're totally there yet. Um, I think primarily due to security risk is probably going to be number one, because I think the accuracy challenge is going to that's going to be resolved faster than the security challenge.
Got it. All right. Thanks for that thought. I think that's fairly actionable. So thanks for that. And thanks for coming along for the chat. Looking forward to doing more discussions with you as we go ahead. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Bye.